Meet Usato Ken, your typical high school nobody, until fate whisks him away to another world where he discovers he's got a talent hotter than a dragon's breath, healing magic. Suddenly, he's gone from zero to hero, ditching his old life like yesterday's leftovers and diving headfirst into a wild adventure of saving the day and winning hearts faster than Goku can power up. Get ready for a ride through a world where healing magic isn't just for patching up hopeless scrubs, it's the key to a whole new level of excitement and maybe even a little romance and some X-rated scenes, if you know what I mean. I hope my mom didn't hear that. Otherwise, I will get the beating of a lifetime. Anyways, weebs, strap in, cause Usato Ken's about to show you the wrong way to use healing magic. One day, as the most popular students, the president and vice president are seen walking through the hallway and getting all the attention from students for most likely just existing, Usato finds a group of birds stuck under the rain and helps them build a nest under the shade, all while daydreaming of a more fantastic life. As he is about to leave, he finds out that someone, who I guess finds him popular enough, has taken his umbrella, and now he has no choice but to wait till the rain settles down before he can leave. But the weather seems to have other plans for him. While he is waiting, the student council president known as Suzune Ikami sees him and lets him know that everyone has to leave soon. He tries to run off under the rain like a fool, but Suzune stops him as she can't let him go without an umbrella. Just then, the vice president, Ryusen Kazuki, pops out and offers this nobody a spare umbrella for him to use. They exchange pleasantries and Usato gets a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be in the company of the most popular people in school as they leave. He definitely needs to go for a Thanksgiving after this. As they are walking, Usato lets them know that they are nicer than he imagined them to be. I guess when you're a nobody, everyone seems proud to you. While Suzune tries to say she's just an ordinary high schooler, Kazuki lets her know how she's nowhere near ordinary, being the top student in school, who's also good at all the sports, which in this case, looks like he's letting her know how much he fantasizes about her. Suzune asks Usato what his plans are after school, but I guess it isn't surprising that he hasn't planned anything for himself yet. Suzune starts mentioning how she feels she doesn't belong in this world, to which Usato agrees, and feels that's a similarity that they share. Just then, our popular duo come to a sudden stop as they start to hear the ringing of bells. Usato, obviously having no specialty to him, was confused about what was going on because he couldn't hear anything. A magic circle suddenly appears beneath them, and Suzune shows a positive reaction to this, giving the impression that she may not be so perfect and more of a crackhead, to be honest. The magic circle takes them away, and they suddenly appear in a throne room in front of a king while being surrounded by guards. While Usato and Kazuki are still trying to make sense of the situation, Suzune completely loses her cool as she can't contain her excitement of being summoned to another world. This further ruins the image Usato had of her, convincing him that she must have been dropped on the head as a baby. The king introduces himself as Lloyd Vulgast Linger, the king of Linger Kingdom, and lets them know that they were summoned as heroes to help defeat the demon lord and his army that has been attacking their kingdom. Kazuki gets really angry at the situation and demands to be sent back home, but the king tells him that the summoning process only works in one direction. This makes Kazuki even lose his composure more, and before he could do anything drastic, the king's guards surround them, but Usato is able to calm him down. King Lloyd then lets them know that he promises to find a way to send them back, but they should help him. Suzune, our crackhead girl, finally gets some composure and asks the king why he refers to them as heroes, since they just met. A court mage named Welsi then explains that the summoning circle is designed to bring accomplished people, and mentions that the bells they heard ringing before was a sign of that. This shows how Usato had no business being there, as the nobody he is, and only got lucky because he happened to be with the cool kids when the magic circle popped up. Welsia then takes them to test the kind of magic powers they have. They each place their hands on a magic crystal, which then reveals that Suzune has an affinity for thunder magic, and Kazuki has an affinity for light magic, which works very well against demons. The nut job being able to control thunder seems like a recipe for disaster, but let's get into that. When Usato places his hand on the crystal and a bright green light shows, Welsi panics and drags Usato to meet the king and let him know what she's discovered. When the king finds out, he starts making plans on how to hide Usato, but just before he's able to commence anything, a lady with green hair slams open the doors of the throne room and enters. The king and everyone in the throne room begin panicking at the sight of her. She notices Usato and asks him if he is a hero, to which the king butts in and mentions that Usato is a nobody who was summoned by their ineptitude. What a way to be introduced to someone you just met. The lady introduces herself as Rose, captain of the kingdom's rescue team. For someone who's supposed to be saving lives, she gives the impression that she's more attuned to taking them. Wellesley then tries to distract Rose by offering to show her to the room where the actual heroes are. As they take their leave, the king calms down, but our oblivious nobody, who can't seem to read the room, asks the king what the green color of his magic means. This catches Rose's attention and sends everyone back into panic mode. As she attempts to take Usato, the king orders Wellesley to protect him, and she uses her magic to wrap him in a bubble and send him flying out the window. Look who's getting all the attention now. So much for being a nobody. Rose speeds out of the room to chase Usato and jumps into the air, smashing the bubble that surrounded him with a strength that's not normal for a supposed healer. The king tries to stop Rose again by telling her that Usato really was just dragged into the situation, but Rose has made up her mind to take Usato and turn him into a full-fledged healing magic user. And just like that, Usato's fate has been sealed by a healer who looks like she has more tendencies to kill and torture. Wellesley then gets back and tells Kazuki and Suzune about the situation and how healing magic users are very rare to find in their kingdom. So Rose took Usato to train him as her subordinate. Hopefully he's able to heal the horrors that await him. Rose brings Usato to a place where he would now call home for the rest of his stay there. She calls for some guys who respond like they have been tortured into submission, and they surround Usato and introduce themselves with the look of predatory in their eyes, like they just found something new to play with. Rose ends up kicking one of them to stop them from making him afraid. You see how she has more tendencies to deal damage? She then tells Usato that these guys can't use healing magic, but lets him know that they are two other healing magic users in the rescue team who are working elsewhere. She lets him know how she'll drum the techniques of healing magic into him, and Usato instincts have never been more strong, telling him to run away. But unfortunately, he has nowhere to run to, and that's how he goes to bed and prepares himself to face the new struggles he has been plunged into. Hayasato wakes up the next day, hoping all the events he just experienced were just a dream, but unfortunately for him, it was all real. Kazuki and Suzune, who are already dressed in uniforms, come to see how he's doing and ease their worries. Usato assures them that he's fine, until he remembers that hell awaits him in his training session today. He decides he'll go through with it because he wants to be of some help. I guess this would help lift the barrier of non-existence that has surrounded him for so long. This resolve helps Kazuki make up his mind to give his best in this new world they were brought to. When they leave, Usato notices as Rose opens the door behind, and he instantly freezes and goes into submission. But Rose tells him that he's free to do whatever he wants, so far as he isn't training, then gives him a journal to use and document how his training regime goes daily. The book might as well carry his will and his last words. After breakfast, Usato begins training by first trying to sense the mana within him, then goes along to read a book containing basic information about the kingdom. He's able to understand the language of the book, because heroes summoned to the world surprisingly have a built-in translator in them. His tortuous training continues when he is forced to run for days in order to build up his strength and stamina. No matter how tired he gets or whatever injury he sustains, Rose just heals him and tells him to continue running, and if he dies, she'll revive. And so Usato is stuck in a never-ending hell where he isn't even allowed to die because of a so-called healer who has the brutish strength of King Kong. Eventually, Usato starts to notice the healing magic manifesting from him, and he's able to cure his fatigue and injuries, allowing him to train for longer. As the days go by, his training becomes more and more brutal, but because he can heal himself, he is able to endure for longer. A week later, Kazuki, Suzune, and a random knight come to visit him, and they see him doing push-ups with a boulder on his back and Rose sitting on top of it. I think Rose is actually trying to get him to die early, because who trains healers like this? Rose teases him and feels he's being cocky, so she adds an extra boulder on his back, nearly signaling the moment where this anime ends. Fortunately, he heals himself and is able to still withstand the pressure. Suzune and Kazuki are still very much surprised at the sight of Usato being able to survive all this. But Suzune falls back to her default deranged nature as she sees Usato's developed muscles and begins drooling with so much interest gleaming in her eyes. Rose mentions that Usato is finally becoming the kind of man she likes, so not only is she a brute, but she's also grooming him. The knight gets angry at the sight of the training Usato is being put through and tells Rose that she's ruining his bright future. Rose then snaps back and lets the knight know that she is going to make Usato her right-hand man, given the fact that he's not the type to give up and has been able to withstand her training. It's not like she really gave him a choice. But, oh well. She then tells Usato to take a break and go catch up with Suzune and Kazuki while she continues her discussion with the knight. The group gets to a place that they're able to relax. Then Kazuki mentions that the knight is actually Commander Siglis, who is known as the strongest knight in the kingdom and is the one teaching them sword fighting. The young girl that came with them then introduces herself as Celia Vulgast Linger, princess and daughter to the king. Usato, remembering how much of a peasant he is, immediately bows down to show respect to her, but she insists that he doesn't have to be so formal. The princess then offers them the pie that she brought. Kazuki then asks Usato how his training is going, and if he trains like that every day, but Usato lets him know that what they saw was actually light. He's so used to suffering now that he doesn't even know what's supposed to be normal anymore, poor kid. Kazuki lets him know how their own training is more moderate, and their health is also being considered. Yeah, rub it in his face how you guys are the actual heroes getting special treatment. Suzune, with her deranged nature, launches at Usato, raising up shirt to reveal his well-defined pecs and muscles while asking for permission to touch them. That's how Usato went from being a nobody to being sexually harassed by a crazy woman who he respected so much before. The situation is later calmed down, and Kazuki asks Usato if it ever gets tough for him. Usato admits it was tough in the beginning, but now it's much more fun and he enjoys where he's currently at. I guess Ms. Rose really did beat out whatever form of normalcy he had left in him. One of the subordinates of Rose then walks up to bring Usato some lunch, but they immediately get into a scuffle because he initially stole his lunch before. Kazuki and the rest then take their leave as he reassures the princess that was worried that this is probably a normal day for Usato. A normal day involving fights with people? Where did his upbringing go wrong? The next day, as he is having breakfast, Rose lets him know that they're heading out and flings a backpack at him, nearly ending his life once again. They have the gates opened for them by a guard who is scared for his life at the sight of Rose. Rose ignores his question of where they're headed and just tells him to shut up and follow. They arrive at a forest known as the Darkness of Linger, where she lets him know that he is supposed to defeat a grand grizzly before coming back. Usato complains of how dangerous those creatures are before Rose picks him up like the gorilla she is and sends him flying through the air down to the forest, while he wails, seeing his life flashing before his eyes once again. As Usato flies through the air and sees how his obituary is going to end up, he ends up protecting himself with his magic, while breaking his fall with his new strength until he lands. Before he's even able to plot out a plan, a white grand grizzly suddenly appears behind and starts chasing him around the forest. He tries to outrun, but the bear keeps up. Then he decides to face the bear head-on, as he remembers that Rose is a more frightening animal than this bear. As soon as he gets ready to fight, two more blue grizzlies appear behind the white one and gang up on him, making him realize how stupid of an idea he had. He eventually runs to a cliff and jumps down a waterfall to hide until bears give up and leave. He then finds shelter at the top of a tree, where he checks his supplies in his backpack and marks his first day of survival. The next day, he heads out with his dagger and tries to mark locations on trees so he doesn't get lost. As he sees a tree covered with bear claw marks, an injured black rabbit suddenly appears from behind a bush, and he heals it with his powers. The rabbit then starts following him around like a lost child with no sense of direction. Luckily for him, the rabbit leads him to the den of the grand grizzly bear family. He spends some days monitoring the bears, but eventually suffers poisoning from the water he drank from a river due to his lack of basic survival skills. Even his rare healing magic couldn't stop his pain and suffering. The following day, his rabbit friend leads him to a cleaner source of water, which he drinks from and feels better. Of course, there's no assurance that this water won't poison him too. But let's trust the animal we just met. The rabbit instincts kick up as it notices something dangerous nearby. Usato follows it to find out what's wrong, and they come across a large and deadly snake which could take their lives instantly. They're relieved when the snake leaves, and Usato goes back to investigate the grizzlies one more time before deciding to go kill them. The rabbit urges him not to go anywhere like a toddler that's about to watch their parents leave the house. Obviously, this rabbit has no idea what its mother is supposed to look like. He then waits till the rain stops and heads off to the grizzly den. As he approaches, A horrific sight meets him when he sees two of the bears dead on the floor with injuries that most likely came from that giant snake earlier. The baby grizzly then appears from under some rocks and weeps at the sight of its dead parents. Usato swears to get revenge for the baby grizzly and heads off to find the snake. The bears tried to kill him before, but sure, he should go ahead and get revenge for nearly being bear food. Suzune and Kazuki come to check up on Usato, but the guys at the cabin let them know that he's been out for like 10 days and hasn't returned yet. Kazuki gets very worried, but Suzune tells him that Usato will be fine, and he should trust both him and Ms. Rose. Sure, trust the woman that's about to end the boy's short and unfulfilled life. Usato prepares himself for his fight with the snake and asks the rabbit to lead the way. I guess he's suicidal to actually go and fight that snake. They come to where the snake is, and he sees the baby grizzly has already engaged it in a fight. I guess the grizzly didn't want the snake messing with its food. He then helps the grizzly and engages in a fight with the snake, taking out its right eye while healing his injuries. The snake baits him to the blind spot of the taken out eye and bites his arm, filling his body with poison, but he is still able to heal the wounds and continue fighting with the aid of the baby grizzly till they take out the snake. As he lies down trying to heal the rest of his injuries, the snake gets up again, and Usato accepts his fate as his life ends here and now, while cursing out Rose for putting him in this situation. Luckily, Rose appears from nowhere and takes out the snake for good. She then mentions that the black rabbit, named Kukuru, gave her information on what was happening. Apparently, Kukuru is her pet that she sent to watch over him. Does this mean Ms. Gorilla has some sort of compassion in her? She explains how the snake was created by the Demon Lord and fled to the forest after it failed to be defeated. She says how she never expected him to defeat it and just wanted him to gain combat experience. I guess since she could revive him, there was no issue for her watching him die. She will truly be his end. The baby grizzly then takes a liking to Usato, and even though it's sad at the loss of its parents, decides to follow Usato from now on. Might be the bear's plan, so save him for lunch later. As Rose carries them and heads out, she points out how she heard the names Usato called her, meaning his end is closer than he realizes. Rose acknowledges Usato and lets him know he passed the test well. She tells him that he can now stand on the battlefield with her, as the demon army will soon be invading again. He still has a little more time to be fully prepared before that time comes. The Demon King is seen asking the commander of the Third Army, Amila Vergret, how the preparations for the invasion are going, to which she replies that they'll be able to invade soon. She leaves, and then is met by Hyreluk, who she refers to as Demon Doctor. He starts making fun of her for being nervous in front of the Demon King. He then proceeds to show her his new experiment, which looks exactly like the snake Usato fought, and for some reason bears the same name even though it's a different prototype. It's obvious this doctor lacks some basic mental skills. I wonder how the Demon King has tolerated him. She mentions how they would meet more troublesome foes on the battlefield, especially Rose's rescue team, which she refers to as kidnappers. What a wonderful name to give to a group of people that are just trying to save their teammates. Since she'd be in command for this current invasion and won't be able to be on the battlefront, she plans on using a mage demon known as the Black Knight during the battle. The next day, Usato wakes up and heads out to feed his new bear friend some fruits for breakfast, which in the process of feeding the bear bites his hand like it's supposed to be natural. Blurin, which Usato has decided to call it, definitely had other plans in store for him. Rose comes along and lets him know that the bear has been approved as property of the rescue team and tells it that it has to earn its stay with them. Blurin's instincts kick in as it sees that Rose might be the predator that ends it before it is able to end Usato. After that, Usato begins a simulation training where he carries Blurin on his back, which is supposed to be like him carrying a wounded soldier, and starts running. Two guys from the cabin pop out from the bush to attack him and also let him know that this is how a real battle would be, as he would be trying to protect the soldier while getting to safety. The other guys continue the attacks, which seem more and more determined to kill him. Considering Rose put them up to this, I'm not surprised. Usato eventually comes to a stop as he's too tired to run and waits for his mana to recover. He then continues the simulation by running around the town, but the town's people don't seem fazed at the sight of a boy running around with a monster on his back. He asks a fruit vendor why that is, and she mentions that they're already used to seeing this kind of thing from the rescue team. Rose has damaged these people so much that they don't even know what's normal anymore. She then gives him a fruit which Blurin chomps down immediately, once again taking Usato's hand with it in the process. As Usato continues his run and decides to meet up with the heroes, he passes a blonde-haired man who calls for his attention but isn't able to keep up with his speed. He helps the man recover, who in turn introduces himself as Orga Fleur and tells Usato that he is one of the healers of the rescue team, and the other healer would be his younger sister. Seems Orga and his sister weren't able to survive the torturous training of Rose, and that's why his stamina isn't so much. Good to know their pride wasn't broken by that gorilla woman. Orga tells him how he and his sister run a clinic helping people in tow, and also how he's not really good at healing himself but can heal others. An incompetent healer who can't heal himself? That's just great. Usato mentions how Rose asked to be part of the front line with her, and he doubts if he's capable of doing such, but Orga reassures him that Rose wouldn't just pick anyone for that role. Orga's sister comes down as Usato leaves, and starts scolding her elder brother. The way younger sisters show their love is quite unique. Usato then heads into the training courtyard where he sees soldiers and Suzune practicing their sword fighting. She immediately gets distracted and greets Usato as he walks in. You can't help but wonder if this is how she would actually be eliminated on the battlefield. She notices Blurrin on his back, and while Usato tries to explain how he met the bear, she is too infatuated to hear anything he's saying. She tries to touch the bear and it smacks her hand away, hurting whatever little pride as a hero she has. She tries again, even with the help of Usato, but the bear just ends up trying to eat their hands. They're really just nothing but food to it. Suzune asks him if he came to see just her, but Usato with his density mentions how he came to see both her and Kazuki. He must be really dense to not notice how Suzune is hitting on him. She tells him that Kazuki went to train by fighting real monsters with Siglis, and when he gets back it would be her own turn to go. Their discussion comes to an end, and Usato heads back, continuing his training along the way while carrying Blurrin on his back. He gets back home and sees Rose standing outside thinking to herself. He approaches her and assures her of his newfound resolve to prove that he's a member of the rescue team by making sure to save those that he can, no matter how scary the situation gets. That's the spirit. Get on her good side and maybe she'll stop trying to kill you. The next day, he is woken up by Rose, who informs him that the king sent a message for him to join Suzune for her training outside the castle. As they set out to meet up with Suzune for their expedition, Rose tells Usato that he's supposed to be the healer for Suzune's party in case of emergencies. The king had requested for him earlier, but Rose refused, but couldn't turn down the king the second time he asked. They arrive and Suzune, who's obviously excited when seeing Usato and Blurrin, introduces him to Aruku and Korin, a knight and mage who would be joining them. This might be the perfect opportunity for Suzune to finally hit her shot with our not-so-unpopular protagonist. Kazuki is seen practicing his sword fighting as the princess approaches looking really worried. He assures her that he's perfectly fine and not overexerting himself. Even Kazuki can't tell when a lady is hitting on him. He might even be denser than Usato. Usato and Suzune head back to the forest where Usato fought the large snake. He can't help but feel how Blurrin would feel returning back here. Suzune, losing herself in the moment, asks to pet Blurrin while he's asleep, but Usato slaps her hands away. Someone should call the animal rights department because we don't know what else she could be capable of. They go back and forth at it for a while until Blurrin wakes up and Usato makes it walk. Suzune then decides she wants to carry the bear, but finds out soon that her obsession for it won't be able to counter its weight as she is crushed under him. Usato heals her, and as they head into the forest, they are stopped by a group of bandits that attack them. Suzune uses her thunder magic to attack them, while Usato gives out commands to her like she is some kind of Pikachu. While the fight continues, some wild boars run out of the woods and also start attacking them. Usato tries to protect Suzune as the Prince Charming that he is, but they both get knocked up and sent flying towards the waterfall that Usato was at earlier when running away from the grizzlies. They get out of the water and try to find shelter. They head into a nearby cave where Suzune uses her thunder magic to start a fire and keep them warm. Then, some monkey creatures known as venom monkeys appear from within the cave. Suzune, being the dumb girl she is, tries to pet them after Usato mentions that they're poisonous. She's too stupid to care, and one of them bites her, sending her to an early grave. At least Usato is kind enough to heal her immediately. When word reaches the king of how Suzune and Usato got lost, he is compelled to tell Kazuki about it. Kazuki flares up at him not sending out a search party early and decides to go find them himself, but Rose stops him and assures him that Usato will definitely keep Suzune safe. Well, now we know she's capable of trusting her subordinates as well. Usato and Suzune decide to take turns sleeping while keeping watch over the night. She ends up lost in thought and tells Usato how she is more comfortable in this world and doesn't want to go back to their old world. She doesn't mind abandoning her friends and family left behind. What a wonderful daughter to have. Usato sympathizes with her and lets her know that he also feels the same way, and they should just focus on saving the people of the Linger Kingdom. The next day, they head out from the cave and try to find their way back to the party when they suddenly meet Blurin and Aruku along the way. Blurin seems to have picked up Usato's scent while they were being searched for. A predator never really forgets the smell of its prey. It's just a matter of time they come to where Blurin's parents died, but the bear seems to have moved on from the incident. So they leave the forest and start heading back home. Usato and Suzune meet the king in the throne room when they safely get back. The king apologizes for getting Usato into the situation, but due to the conditioning he has received from Rose, he tells the king that it's something he's used to. Rose and Siglis wait behind to have a meeting with the king as Suzune and Usato leave. Kazuki and Celia meet them in the hallway, and he lets them know how worried he was when they went missing. Suzune tells Kazuki that he can be reckless, but Usato nearly tells everyone how she embodies recklessness, considering what happened with the venomous monkeys. Suzune shuts him up, protecting whatever form of dignity she had left. They head outside and continue their conversion. Kazuki says how Rose had so much faith in Usato, not dying, but he isn't surprised by such comments anymore. Usato tells Kazuki to remain pure and never change, so that he doesn't become tainted like him and Suzune. Putting himself in the same category as that crazy girl, you would think he had better standards. Suzune and Usato then take their leave while Kazuki bids them farewell. Celia mentions how close they really are and wishes she was close to Kazuki like them. She lets her young and naive heart lead as she tells Kazuki to address her with just her first name, getting one step closer to nabbing her dream man. Rose and Siglis, during their meeting with the king, are informed about how the Demon Lord's army have started making their move. Siglis leaves to inform the commanding officers and ready the troops. The king asks Rose to scout and find out how far the army has come, while also asking to return as a battalion commander, further proving that our superwoman was indeed taking lives before. She refuses the king's request since she hasn't forgiven herself for losing her comrades after their last battle. She blames herself for their deaths and says it's one of the reasons she created the rescue squad. Her other reason is to look for someone who won't die easily and has the will to keep pushing. All these traits unfortunately point to poor Usato, who's just trying to survive out here. She leaves and heads to the border to see how close the Demon King's army is. The Demon King's army is seen building a bridge to cross over to Linger Kingdom. Their commander, Amila, tries to tell the Magic Black Knight how he is supposed to listen to her as his superior, but he couldn't care less, and makes her look like a nagging brat. Rose appears at the border and flings a tree trunk at their bridge, which delays the army's advance for a few days. Usato goes on a delivery message the next day, as directed by Rose. As he walks around town using a map, he seems to draw more attention to himself by not being weird and running around with a monster on his back. The map brings him to the Fleur Clinic where he meets Orga's younger sister, Ururu. She does the worst job possible at trying to remember his name before he reminds her, saving whatever pride he had left. She takes him to where Orga is treating a boy with his magic. Usato then delivers the letter Rose sent, and Ururu tells him how her healing is much like her brother's, being able to heal others better than she can heal herself. She tells how Rose was desperate to really train, but she seems happier now. With Usato being her new punching bag, there's no way she wouldn't. Someone comes into the clinic to let Orga know about some people that just got injured falling off a roof. They head over there immediately to help out. Usato is able to heal a critically injured person for the first time successfully with the help of Orga's advice. Orga asks him to come help out once in a while at the clinic whenever he's free. Asking for free labor in this economy is quite bold of him. As Usato leaves, Orga tells his sister that the letter was to summon them to war with the Demon Lord's army and they need to be prepared. Usato then collects a bag of fruits for Blurin from the fruit vendor lady, but he already starts eating them for himself. Just then, he is stopped by a small girl with fox ears who shows him a vision of soldiers dying during the war and the Black Knight that slays Kazuki and Suzune. Thanks for watching, fellow weebs. If you enjoyed this recap, dive into the next video or playlist. See you in the next recap.